Hey, everybody, this is Liz coming to you today with a special owner with Augusta Nation. He is a coach, and we've gone through his story before, but I want him to just give us a little bit of update of who he is, where he lives, and when he joined Augusta, and then we'll go on from there.
Sure. So my name is Connor Stead. I'm the owner of the Evansville, Indiana location. We're in the southern boot of Indiana, right in between Illinois and Kentucky. And I joined Augusta, and I think I paid my franchise fee in like October or November of 2021. Came to training like 6 weeks later. Came to conference like 2 weeks later, and then been in Augusta. This is my third season, third spring rush, or I've completed 3 spring rushes with Augusta, going into our fourth year next year.
Incredible. And did you have a lawn care company before you joined Augusta?
I did. So I'm 26 now. I've been doing this since I was 11 or 12 years old. I was always the neighborhood kid, and then it went through college, or then it went through high school. Got my dad's truck. Then it went through college. Bought my own truck. As it was, you just need a larger truck, like an F-250, to start pulling stuff around. And then, yeah, so I've always done this. I was doing it with me and like 2 or 3 employees before we joined. But once I entered college and got married, I was like, I kind of need to take this a lot more seriously or figure something out. So
No
that's when I
kidding.
started really
Okay,
heavily
so
consulting Mike.
okay, cool. So when you started, how many customers did you have, and what services were you offering?
Oh, like when I started when I was like a kid. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
where were you when you first started Augusta with everything?
Okay. So I was doing about 200 to $250,000 a year before I joined Augusta, and we just started getting into hardscape, if I was even interested in that, because I had hired a guy who had that experience, and so I wasn't really wanting to handle it. But he came from a little bit of a larger company, and honestly, I just wanted somebody to take care of it, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
really how that goes at that size of business. So then you kind of
Yes.
need the trailer, the skid steer or the dingo, and the organization, the logistics, and there was just so much that I was just ignorant to that. Um, so we did about 70% simple, probably 60 or 70% simple services before I joined already.
Wonderful. Okay. So that was to set the precedent for what I want to talk about today to get your opinion as a business owner in general, not so much from Augusta Nation, but so that the owners that listen can understand themselves and what to expect at each stage of their growth. So when our new franchisees come to our state, Washington State, and do their training, they are given a document called the stages of growth. And it's a
Mhm.
talk that Mike does. And I will not disclose everything because that's the benefit of being a part of Augusta. Uh,
Right.
but just to describe the stages of growth and what an owner's going to go through and what it was like for you and what you're expecting from the stages ahead from you, I think would be beneficial to our listeners. So the first stage of growth would have been before you even joined Augusta. So the revenue would be 0 to 100K for an owner.
Right.
And there is a role of an owner, what the business looks like, concerns and doubts of the owner, what they should be focused on, and then Mike will give a pep talk. So just what I want to cover here is the role of the owner is doing everything at this point and what the business looks like. One man, one man show, you're doing everything in the business, usually operated out of your garage or a local storage facility, and you are the revenue producing team member and you are ultra efficient. So
Yep.
can you tell us what that stage was like for you, what your concerns were, and what you were focused on?
Sure. So I remember, oh, that was probably my freshman or sophomore year, because I always did it throughout school. And, the school season are always, they kind of like overlap like 50-50 with the summer season, or with the lawn care season for the most part, because we do March through like November here. And of course, you have school like the first 2 months and the last 2 months. So whenever I was doing all of it, I mean, you do all of it. I mean, every single bit. You talk to all the customers. They call you at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. They have nightmares over grass. They have, everything's weighted on your shoulders. You do all the billing. You do all the estimates, all the maintenance, every single project you are doing. You can be very profitable during that stage because it's really just
Mm-hmm.
you. Um, and I think I probably had to help her a little bit sooner around that 100,000
Okay.
because it was because I was in school, and so I hired another buddy who was homeschooled, and he would work with me like 2 days a week. Like the days I was at school, he would help run he would run the route while I was at school. So I actually structured my schooling schedule around mowing. So if I had class Tuesday, Thursday, I would mow Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so long days, long hours, but I mean, it's a simpler time sometimes when you think about it.
So the owner that's going to ask this question is, did you have everything go to your cell phone and did you answer during the day? Or did you just let it go to voicemail and respond to all of that at the end of the day because you were handling
Sure.
everything? But how do you get any work done?
Yeah, I called during. I would take the call if I was in the middle of a yard, or I would because back then like Apple didn't have that like little quick response like, hey, let me call you back. I'm in the middle of something. So
Mm-hmm.
I would, yeah, everybody talked to me. Everybody responded. I was the only line of defense on the communication side, or it was text, call, or email. Back then, it was a lot of texting and a lot of demand because it's so easy to get a hold of you at that time.
And then this employee that you had, how
Hmm.
did you give him his routes? I mean, did you have a CRM at that time? Did you write out his jobs? Did he do the same route all the time so he knew the customers? He didn't need job
Hmm.
notes. Like, what's it like when it's just you and then you bring on that one person?
Yeah, so I remember I used to write it all down in Microsoft Word and just write out the route in the order that it was supposed to, and then what you were like job details is what I would call it, which would be like service notes. I would say mow, blow, trimmer, edge, and then the expected time on the property, or so everything else like that you would have now on like Copilot or Service Autopilot, like it tells you the budgeted hours. Um, I moved into Yard Book, which I think if you're going to do it as a side hustle or just a 1 or 2 man band, I think that's probably the easiest, simplest way to go. It doesn't have anything intricate. It doesn't have anything complicated. But back then, you actually couldn't route. So I would still have to manually print off a list every single day.
hmm
They were in very heavy beta at the time.
And then did you email that or did you take a picture of it and text it to your employee?
I would print it and I would give it to them.
That is
They did have
crazy.
an option later on where you could download the PDF, and then I would text them the PDF or email them
hmm
the PDF from there.
Okay, so the owner of a small business just getting started, even teenagers are going to experience what you did because they're going to be in school also and wonder how they can make it work. So our
Hmm.
next point here is concerns and doubts of the owner. So where were you emotionally, intellectually, and what were your fears or doubts about running the business?
Yeah, I think since I was in that stage a little bit younger, I found it very odd that I'd have grown men or women arguing with a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old and kind of like
hmm
berating them or belittle them because they're like, "Oh, you're just the lawn guy." And so like I don't think I really got out of that until I don't know, probably until I was doing it when I was married, so only a couple of years ago. But at that smaller stage, it is it's just different at that time. I don't know
hmm
if you can further on that question.
Yes. So the younger guy that is trying to get his business started, would you think that the age barrier is an advantage or a disadvantage to them when they're, say, 16, 18 years old? Some of them are even younger that, start their lawn care businesses just like you did.
Yeah. I think it really depends. If you want to be the forefront of the company later on down the road, like the main person all the time, I think it's totally fine. But later on in life, whenever you may not want to be that person anymore, it can be really hard because you know people know Connor. Like, oh well,
hmm
Connor always did it the way that I wanted to do it, and you didn't have to write anything down. You just did it. Like when you show up to a property, you just know you're going to do a good job. And so it definitely takes a little bit for them to get used to. And whenever you are such a younger kid, of course, you're doing it for 10, 15, $20. And then whenever
hmm
you buy a truck, you're like, okay, I have to do it for 30. Or whenever you buy a zero turn instead of a push mower, I have to do it for 40 now because it's more expensive. And then so it's different. I think it has its advantage for sure because it will probably help you get the ground going sooner. But I mean, I think just whenever you're young, you have nothing to lose. So it really comes down to like tenacity, just however you want to put your feet on the pavement and just go.
hmm Somebody younger who is was in that place that you were, or somebody who works the full-time job. That's likely what's going to happen here, and it's going to be a side hustle. How did it interrupt your schooling? And for an older owner, it would be how it would interrupt their work day. How did you navigate that with, I'm sure your teachers knew, or did you leave
Yeah.
class, or did you text in class? I'm sure there had to be some sort of understanding.
I had a couple teachers or professors that would let me step out and take a phone call, because I was in like the business co-op, so I would do half days in high school in my junior and senior year. So I'd get off at like anywhere between 11:45 and 1 o'clock, depending because we had alternate days. And so they would let me do that, or I could text. If they'd say, "Hey, put your phone away," and I'd kind of give them like a weird look or whatever. I would just put it away and then kind of go back to it whenever somebody else wasn't. So, I mean, people were understanding, and then I had teachers that wanted business with us, and so I thought that was kind of funny. Then it kind of led to a different lead pool with them because people want to support a hard working individual, especially one of their students. And
Mm-hmm.
so that had its pros, and they were very understanding because part of the work co-op, you have to have a job with so many hours. Well,
I
in the
see.
winter at that age, I didn't have any hours, and
Right.
so the teacher understood that I just did 40 or 50 hours during the summer or during the fall, and then I couldn't do any there. And then I did sports, I did soccer. I would just wear my soccer cleats and go mow go mow the yard. My parents would drop me off at the house. I'd walk home, or however it figured out at the end, or I would ride my bike over there because of course I started in my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just tell people, like, if we had to go on vacation, I would try to do it beforehand, or I would try to have a buddy do it, which doesn't always work out, but you kind of live and learn with some of that.
Yeah. So the next thing would be what Mike would say to the owners here. What should they be focused on? So, what was your main focus at that time? Was it trying to get more customers to build the business, or were you just trying to grind and make it through school?
Oh no, it was definitely money motivated. I just wanted whatever clients that I could. I mean, I probably had 30 regular clients while I was in high school. So I mean, I was doing, I don't know, I think my senior year I did 60,000 while I
Wow.
was 17 or 18 years old. So I mean, we made it happen. And back then I was only charging like $35 an hour, so I was making more than some of my teachers.
I hope they didn't know that.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. So, if you had to give a pep talk, or some sort of encouragement to people in that first stage, what would you say to them?
I think kind of like earlier, like sometimes it can be simpler. Like I think kind of just enjoy the ride. Like I hate to say like smell the roses, but like it's a simple time. Um, that's whenever everything's probably going to be the simplest it's probably ever going to be. Even though later on, right now you feel it super complicated, it is
Hmm.
very simple. You can control everything. You don't have to. There's just not as much to worry about. Even though, like I said, it seems like everything is worrisome or everything stresses you out. I think just trying to do a good job, trying to make sure that you have a lasting effect with the customer and building those relationships while you can have one-on-one can be super important.
Yes, and you
And not
don't
taking
have a
things
clue.
personally.
True, true. And you don't have a clue what's coming up next,
Right.
which is
Right.
probably good. Ignorance is bliss at some point.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
So you went through that stage very early, probably earlier than most people, and then you moved on to the 100 to 200K. So that would be the second stage of growth.
Hmm.
So the role of the owner at that time is you're still doing everything. In your case, it was slightly different because you needed help. You were in the field, but by then you probably had a second truck and employee. How was the 100 to 200K for you in that regard?
Yeah, so the 100 to 200 would probably be my like freshman or my most of my except for my senior year in college. So we did about I think we did like 135 or 145 my freshman or my sophomore year of of college, and it was just me and one other individual. My buddy Braden, he was in my wedding, so I mean we were still pretty close. And now I mow his yard, and he pays me
Wow,
instead of doing it for
that's
free,
great.
right? And so he helped a ton, but during that stage it was still us in one truck. We had one
Hmm.
zero turn and like one 30-inch push mower. I think I maybe had like an old sit down zero turn that I was like an old snapper, but then I started to get into like I bought a Skag, and so I got into like more commercial equipment, and it was still just us and one trailer and one main zero turn and one truck.
So that actually is a little bit different than somebody moving in the 100 to 200K because you weren't doing everything yourself. You had help and you were still working in the field. But by then, according to this, you would have had your second truck and one employee. So
Mhm.
it looks like you were saving some money in one regard because you didn't buy the second truck, but you were starting to get more mowers and more equipment.
Yeah, because then we started. If we had like a larger yard, then of course the balance of somebody trimming to mowing, like the ratio was off. So like, I think probably instead of buying another truck, I think at that time I bought a 36 inch, so we'd have a 52 and a 36 with the push mower, so that way we could get the jobs done a little bit quicker or faster. And so I think, well, and then probably about that time we bought another 52 for like some of the larger days that we would have like larger commercial stuff, like 3 or 4 acre properties, a couple churches that we picked up. So I mean, but we had really good route density. I think me and Braden did, like I said, 125 to $150,000 with 3.5 to 4 days a week of mowing, because we always did like the 410s or 312s at that time. Well, I didn't
So
have a
you
choice. I was in school.
Exactly. And so did you work together for the most part? And he was
Mhm.
still taking because well, he would have probably not been homeschooling at that point, right? Was he done with school?
Yeah, he's 2 or 3 years. He's 2 or 3 years younger than me. So I mean, I think right as I was going into college, he was just getting his license.
Wow.
Yeah, and
That's
pulling a
that's
trailer at
awesome.
16, 17 years old, right?
No accidents? Did he ever have one?
No, no,
Impressive. That's great.
yeah.
So, what the business typically looks like between 100 and 200K is you now have 20 to 30 regular mowing customers and get cleanups to fill your schedule. You start to get booked out 2 to 3 weeks. This is when you go and get a full time employee, which would be you working full time typically, and then your one truck, two-man band, but you know that will change soon because you're getting very busy. So
Hmm.
for you though, what did the business look like? You just kind of described it a little bit, but this would say that you were both full time. So would you say between the two of you, it would have been a little more than one full time employee if you had been doing it yourself?
Oh yeah, I definitely couldn't have done it without him, because even though I maybe didn't put as many field hours in, I still put my 10 or 12 hour days in with him. Or if we had to work on Friday or Saturday, because it had to go around whatever. Some days I would cut class to, if we had a bunch of rain, and make it work. But I still had to do all the maintenance. I still had to do. Everybody was calling me still. Everybody was still texting me, which only got worse and worse as we grew more and
Hmm.
more.
Yeah, 100%. So, what were your concerns and doubts at that time, like work life balance? I know that you're a Christian and you were
Mhm.
starting to take on a lot of responsibility at your church as well. How did you do that, plus your family? At that
Mhm.
time, you weren't married, I'm assuming, or were you?
No.
Okay.
Nope, not during that time. No, I didn't get married until after college, so we're still in the middle of college on this timeline for me. But I don't know. My mom always tells me not to burn the candle at both ends, and I always tell her I don't feel like you really can understand what you can or cannot do until you figure out where that burning actually begins or ends. And so
Oh, that's awesome.
I just burnt the candle at both ends, and I just enjoyed the hustle. I enjoyed waking up early, conquering the day. I still went to the gym. I was still involved on campus. I still had familial things. I think my sophomore year, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. And so like there were other things that happened that kind of throw a wrench in whenever you're doing that. I don't know. It's just a lot of hard work. Like if you, during that stage when everything relies on you, it is just go, 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 go all the time. There is no
Yeah.
stopping.
Yeah, so that would be definitely a concern of an owner. And what were you focused on at that particular time? It looked like you had no pause in your focus, which
Hmm.
the burnout typically must come at another stage because you were still in massive growth and you were good with it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean everything was paid off at the time, so it was just slowed as it was going. Like you'd pick up this contract, or you'd pick up this client, or then I started doing service agreements, and which at the time, because I was a student, um, I moved out my junior year. So I guess halfway through the first 2 years of college, I didn't need to necessarily make something in the winter, even though I would try to save 5 months income by about Labor Day, which is something to consider during the younger stages. Try to save about 3 to 4 months of expenses, which kind of is easier when you're younger, but it's still something to
Mm-hmm.
consider, especially if you're going to make it a full-time job during this stage. You're either going to have to be creative, or you're going to have to find something that, especially if they rely on your income, you're going to have to save all those profits, and then unfortunately you're going to have to kind of deplete it in the winter time. But yeah, it was just go 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 all the time, and I just made I just made. I was either late to a couple things, or every once in a while you'd have to skip, or like just show up later, or you helped with other things whenever you could.
Was there any content online that you were able to follow to stay motivated or to learn how to grow the business?
Yeah, I think at my age, I would listen to like Keith Kalfas, Johnny Moe. Um, every once in a while, I would do Jonathan Potoshnik, but I probably really didn't understand the concepts as well
Mm-hmm.
at that point. It was more so like Geek to Freak Lawn Care. So it was more like vlog style people at that time than it was like information. They'd give you like quick tips or trips or tricks, but they wouldn't necessarily give you like solid, like foundational business advice.
That's good. So you didn't have a pie in the sky like attitude of this entrepreneurial person who is trying to act way beyond their level. You were pretty grounded, it sounds like.
Yeah, it also helped. My dad was in business for Berry Plastics, which is one of the largest plastic manufacturers in the world, and so like he, he would stray me in the right direction or help me with customer topics that needed to be handled, or stuff like that too. So he had a business mind, so that helped out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So your focus at that time, was it just to massively grow to see where it would go, or were you actually setting revenue goals?
So I was sort of setting revenue goals, but I wanted my customers' neighbors was kind of our biggest thing. Like I didn't necessarily like I wanted. We did a lot of like property. I tried to upsell property monthly maintenance, or like where we'd come monthly or bi-weekly, and or I tried to sell 12-year contracts at the time, because like I said earlier, you have to think about like the winter income. And so I think I would have like $2,000 or $3,000 a month in winter income, so I didn't have to save as much. So like I think having a little bit of that with the people who pay a la carte is also super helpful at that stage, because it kind of just it it's the same money either way. It just takes something off your plate. Um, and so like I wanted to grow, but I was more so like money in the bank concerned at that time, which I guess I could do because I was lean, or I did live at home. But whenever I moved out, that kind of changed.
Yeah, for sure, with your expenses. And then did you have loans on these mowers that you had purchased?
I didn't have very many loans at all on the mowers. I think I had one zero turn mower on the Skag that I bought like my senior year going into college, but it was like $140 a month at 0% interest. So it wasn't anything to really fret about. And I ended up paying that off in 2 years instead of 4 years.
Awesome. Okay. And so if you had to give a word of advice or a pep talk to somebody in the 100 to 200,000 range, what would you say to them?
It's okay to say no to some things. I think whenever you're in that stage, I think the business is always at your forefront, and that's okay. Like I think that's the time whenever something like your friends or family like, oh, you're always concerned, or you're always working, or you're always doing this or the other. I think it's okay. You
Hmm.
can keep working.
Okay, cool. So our next revenue growth area, the stage, would be
Hmm.
200 to 500K. So what I'd like to see and hear, were you in this growth stage when you came to Augusta?
Yeah, I was at the very beginning of it, like the 225, 250 stage.
Okay,
So I had
and
just
first,
entered it.
okay, and how long was this stage for you? So somebody might ask, um, going into this and being around 225, was this a long stage for you?
Oh yeah, I stayed way too long. I stayed for 4 years, which is not necessarily good, because you're not big enough to have some of the profits, and you're not necessarily small enough to not have some of the costs that you do have occurring.
So let's go into that. So the role of the owner is typically the project manager and estimator. What the
Mm-hmm.
business looks like is you are like an octopus. Each tentacle
Mm-hmm.
is an employee, but at the end of the day, they tie back to you. So you're involved in every estimate, every sale. Leads are starting to flow in, and you get overwhelmed with the new work sometimes. You know you're going to need systems to continue growth. So
Mm-hmm.
what were your concerns and doubts at that stage?
Oh, that's a very stressful stage. That's the whole reason I joined Augusta. There's so many things to figure out. Like you're no longer the neighborhood kid. Now you have people on your payroll. Now you need the dump trailer, which those aren't cheap. They're 8, 9, 10, $12,000 as you start to get into some like you think you need to get into projects, or you think landscaping is the only way to make money, or you think you have to work on the business, not in the business. I feel like you're like you said, you're like an octopus. You're pulled in so many directions at that stage because you're not quite big enough and you're not quite small enough either. Like it's big enough to take it seriously, but it's not small enough. But it's small enough to think that you have all these extra occurring costs. Like you have, like your rent stays about the same, your insurance is about the same, but your payroll. So I mean, like that margin gets compressed. But during that time, it's one of the reasons I joined because that's like, what is it? I think that's the most emotionally stressful
Mm-hmm.
time because you are pulled in so many directions. Everybody wants you. Like I said, now you have employees. Now they need your attention. So you're either hiring and firing, or there's a lot of relationship capital that you have to have with them. Yeah, there's a lot going on in
Mm-hmm.
that stage. I stayed way too
So,
long.
so at the beginning of that stage, where were you with your employees and trucks and mowing customers, I guess?
Hmm. Yeah, so at that time I did have 2 trucks. I had moved out of my parents' house. I had my own place. I bought it whenever I was 20. So going into my junior year of college, I bought a house from the profits that I had previously, and so then I rented out the rooms as well to help kind of separate some of that cost. Um, I had 2 trucks. I had about 2 employees, me and 2 employees at that time, pretty much full time. Braden and then my uncle Troy worked with me either part time to full time, depending on the seasonality of the business, or if we had projects or however else that worked. That's whenever you kind of stop paying people cash. You start putting them on payroll. There's liability. There's workers' comp. There's big boy insurance, not just personal insurance anymore. Um, yeah, just some of those things start to come out of the woodworks that you don't necessarily expect.
So it's definitely a huge transition on every single level and a lot more
Yeah.
stress for the business owner. So did you get a little bit like frantic or nervous, like I need more help? And then did you look online to see if there was anything newer, or start in- entering into content for general business owners because there wasn't much in the landscape industry?
Yeah, I think at that time, then I started to get to know some of the like larger fertilization companies because then we needed people to refer to. So you kind of build your network at that time as well. Um, but then they started turning me on to like Rich Dad Poor Dad, or the Millionaire Next Door, or the E-Myth Landscape edition, and some of the more like mindset books. They can't necessarily change your business per se at that stage, but they can definitely change your outlook on how you're going to future projection of how the business is going to go.
Oh, that's very helpful. And at that time, was Mike online yet and giving any sort of business advice? Well, I know that he was, but had you discovered him yet?
No, the only thing I remember about Mike at that time, whenever I was like 20 years old, is he did a video with Brian Shane with Top Notch Lawn Care like 5 or 6 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, and he
Mm-hmm.
flew out to like Wichita, Kansas, and that was like the only time I had seen Mike at that time.
So it was because of your content that you were listening maybe from somebody else or just a search.
Hmm. Yeah, because I listened to Top Notch all the time at the time, and then Mike showed up on the podcast, and then of course when I get older, I start getting into audiobooks. Then there's podcasts on Spotify as that starts to get more and more popular, and then Mike is on there. Then he's on there with like Brian Fullerton or the Simple Growth, or he has his own podcast, the Entrepreneurship. Um, there's just
The
more
landscape
things.
business course.
Yeah, landscape business course. Brian Fullerton's entrepreneurship. So the realm of lawn care being less segmentized and being more professional started to increase.
Yeah, because this is such a long transition for you between the 2 and the 500, your concerns and doubts, what are they at that time that you can't find a good employees or you can't keep up with the word of mouth? Actually, were you even marketing at that point or was it all word of mouth?
We had basic trucks and yard signs and business cards at the time, and we maybe support like a one-off team here or there for like 500 or 600 bucks for a sponsorship, and then Facebook ads really were the only things. And I didn't even know Facebook ads. I just sponsored a post. So I mean, my money probably went in the toilet, and I didn't know anything about it. But I thought that I
Right.
was doing the right thing because I was spending $25 a week on advertising, and so like you just didn't know, but you just thought you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And was there a stress in finding employees or the guys you have seem pretty solid?
At that time, when I bought the house, then I started hiring people. I probably went through my first year over 200. I probably went through 7 or 8 employees, which was different. And then that was actually the year of 2020 with COVID. So that was fun.
Yeah.
Um,
And so your leadership skills had to take a huge leap during that time to be
oh,
able
yeah.
to not only hire these people, but to build a culture and to lead them. How was
hmm
that for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, we grew by about 100,000, which at 21, 20, however old I was at the time is a lot.
Yeah.
And you had to start hiring more people. You don't necessarily know how long they're not getting the jobs done in the same amount of time that you would do. So your schedule's all over the place. You're paying everybody hourly. So it's just as long as the work's not getting done, then we're having to work on Friday or Saturday to catch up with it because, there was some time waste here and there. And then in 2020, so employees were different because I'd never hired, and then you just paid people just like as you did. And so that was just a normal thing. So it didn't really, it was so new. It was
Mm-hmm.
at that stage, you really don't know what the issue is. It's just everything's
Yes.
the issue.
Yes. Yeah, so that would make sense. That would be the concerns and the doubts of the owner, as well as complaints from customers, learning to
hmm
lead employees. What was your main focus? Were you still just scrambling to keep up and just taking all of this as it came in, or did you actually have a focus of revenue or something with your team, or what did that look like?
I wanted to do about 250,000, but I don't necessarily, but like I wasn't tracking any of it. Like a lot of it was word of mouth. I thought that we were just going to grow there just because we were going to grow there because we had grown the
Hmm.
other years. And so I didn't have a huge advertising like plan or marketing strategy. Um, and then that's probably when I bought a dump trailer that season. That's probably when I started to get into some like larger mulch installs, like 10 or 12 yards, because that's what we could hold. Or I started to get into like larger, I started bidding on commercial work because now we kind of had a couple mowers. Now we could. And so you're really just stretched quite a bit at that
Hmm.
time.
So you started listening to Mike Moore, and he
hmm
franchised during that time and had a
hmm
lot of content coming out. What was your thought process that it came to a point where I need more or I need help? Or what was it that you thought that joining a franchise would get you because you had already established the beginning of your business? Did you feel stuck and that you needed outside help?
Yeah, I was tired of reinventing the wheel. Like there's so many wheels
Hmm.
that are already made, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, I do it this way," and I'm like, "Well, that's dumb. Like, why do we have to keep like you're trying to redo employment plans or like whenever you're not even there yet, or you're like
Yes.
worried about like, well, this is what I do. Word of mouth is the only thing that I've ever done for 30 years, and I'm like, well, that doesn't help me get a customer tomorrow.
Hmm.
Um, and so like, I don't know. I was just tired of listening to I wouldn't call them chucking a trucks, but people who weren't out of their own way.
Yes. Oh, that's very good input, and probably didn't have things like a list of what to ask employees when you
Right.
hire them, the onboarding thing, and you're so
Right.
young and trying to deal with all that paperwork and what you need
Oh yeah.
now for an employee. So when you joined Augusta, was it helpful to you that there were systems and this is what you do and this is what you do next, which you had already done some of those things?
hmm
I'm assuming you had a brand transition that you had to
Yep.
do. How was all of that getting started and making that switch?
Oh, I would say the year before I had joined Augusta, I was like, that's the year I also got married, but I was also probably the unhealthiest version of myself because um, that's whenever you try to work on the business, whenever you really need to be the worker or the manager, and you need to work in the business, start developing some teams, some culture, some whatever else you have going on. Like it's kind of like the ignorance is bliss. Then you got married, then I have
Hmm.
to think about other things to worry about. I have somebody
Yeah.
else to take care of. And
Hmm.
she just got out of college the year before, right there, like 2 months ago, and I got out the year before. So it's just a totally different life that you're trying to live at the time. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's just it's I was trying to do systems and I was trying to do approaches, but I didn't really know. So I feel like the team could kind of tell that they were half baked ideas because I'm always trying to you're trying to invent it because you think you have to be original
Hmm.
whenever it's really not. And so equipment wasn't standardized. I just thought, oh, I'm going to buy this if that's what they think that they need to make the job done quicker. Whenever that's some of that stuff isn't really what pushes the needle.
Well, it sounds like this for all business owners is the most difficult, probably when they could get the most discouraged, trying to find balance between their life. Because did you try to have a standard that you weren't going to work on Sunday because of your responsibilities with your church? And like for most people, even if they don't go to church, it's a day for their family.
Hmm.
So were you then starting to fill Sunday with work as well?
Probably not a ton yet. I think in this stage, it can cause you to do two things. It can either cause you to buck up and like get the work done, or it can cause you to start to avoid things. And I think before I joined
Mm,
Augusta, I was definitely starting to avoid things. Like answering the phone was overwhelming. You'd have people call you at 10, 11 o'clock at night or on the weekends or whatever else because everything's an emergency to somebody who's unhappy. Um, and so trying to have like that separation between personal and business time can be very complicated at that time or seemingly impossible. Like again, like now I got married, so it's just like my wife wants me there at dinner. She doesn't want me on my phone at dinner, and like that's
right.
just to you at that stage that feels impossible to accommodate because like
Yes.
they're upset with you or they need something done or you just worked 12 hours and somebody wants your attention but your work is not done.
So it seems like for every owner, some of them I would say never even get out of this. Like you were there for 4 years, but
Hmm.
you did grow. I mean, that's 300,000 difference. There's a ton that happens to you and to the
Hmm.
business and the transitions of life that they're trying to figure out. So how did you focus, or were you focused? Like you said, you just started avoiding. So was your focus, oh, we need money, or were you just like, I'm getting tired of doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I was getting to the point where I'd been doing that for 12, 10 years at the time because I did it when I was like 12. And I was tired of, I didn't want to forever be in the field. And I wanted a career for my employees. And I always hate it when people call their employees helpers. Like, oh, I have a helper. Like, that's so disrespectful to
Mhm.
the individual that you have working with you. Like, they're not a helper, they're your employee. And so, like, I wanted people to have employees. They wanted to have careers. They had employment plans, like to move up in the corporate ladder of your location of things. And so I wanted to take business and life more seriously. And so that's whenever I started listening to Mike really hardcore, probably that year or so before. And definitely joining Augusta made me not avoid things as much as what I was doing beforehand.
Got it. So let's address payroll. Was that a big stress to you thinking of, oh, now I am wanting to give these employees long-term careers,
Hmm.
but I hardly have the money for payroll, but now you know you're responsible for
Yeah.
them and their families to a certain extent. Not everybody
Right.
feels this way, but it's a lot of pressure when you think of them leaning on you for that. So,
Hmm.
did you have the funds for payroll, or were you pretty stretched thin then?
So Braden, probably the first year I moved in my house, I started paying him about $100 a week and over the winter, which he lived at home. So $100 a week was just nice to have, but I didn't want him to get another job. I was like, hey, we'd have a job here or there. So yeah, I started stressing about it probably before they even brought it up to me because I was just like,
Hmm.
oh, I got to worry about this because they're going to worry about it when sometimes those things aren't even brought up. And those, you think about those things way before they do. And then that next year, I had in 2020, I had my employee Zach, which was the year before we had joined Augusta, which is probably going to be my operations manager. At the Augusta location now, he's been with me for about 4 or 5 years. He had a family. He needed winter income, so I stressed more about winter income than I did payroll per se, because you want to hire adults because then they take the job more seriously. At least you hope. That's the hope. And so then I had to figure out ways to pay him throughout the winter, or do
Mhm.
unemployment, or at the time give a little bit of extra cash to supplement, because you just need people to, like, you kind of have to buy. You always think that you have to buy the loyalty, is really kind of like what it comes to.
Yeah, I remember the gut-wrenching part of that, considering your employees and trying to have funds for that, and the big thing was winter work, not having
Hmm.
anything for them, but not wanting to lose them for sure. So if you had to give someone advice now that you went through that and it was a very challenging time, what kind of pep talk would you give to them?
Um, Pep talk, I don't know. Word of advice, I probably could. I think during that stage, it's okay to do the boring work. Like during this stage, it's okay to keep mowing the lawn, or it's okay to, like, you feel like you're doing the same thing day over day over day over, but like, um, that's okay to keep doing that. And then I guess like the pep talk is, um, you can really meet a lot of good people along the way too. At the same time, you can meet some really good employees. Like Zach came in whenever I was not knowing what to do, and he helped build up a good chunk of myself over the years. And he's probably one of the reasons I, instead of being a boss, I became a leader later on. So I think you can meet some really key individuals or really good people along the way too.
And how was it for you being in Augusta? Did the camaraderie help? Did you have like a WhatsApp group of all the people that had
Mhm.
been in your class with you? How did you start to build yourself up in the community?
Oh, my mom said I could talk to a brick wall growing up. So I just, Bryce Clousing, he was the person that I had made the call with, because he was looking at joining at the same time, and he would have been going to the prospective training that Lee was trying to get me on at the time, or proposed training. And he's probably the reason I said yes to Augusta. So I think, and now we're friends these days, and we talk pretty much every day or every week. And then, I think just being around like-minded people is really, really helpful. And I'm in a group chat with several other franchisees now at this point, whether it be the Augusta Midwest group, or the group that we call the Dean's List that you know about, or the FAC. Or I feel like it really just sharpened the tool in the toolbox that I probably had the foundation of. I just didn't know how to use it until it was like awoken, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. So just to reiterate, you had been in business for how long when you got to the 500 mark?
Oh, I think seriously, probably about 4 years.
Okay. Okay, that gives people a good context. So, and that was a very challenging time, probably the most challenging part that people will face. So, where are you now?
Yeah. So this year, so last year we did about a little over 400,000, and then this year was whenever I was like, hey, we really need to keep going. And so what Nick was telling me on the max metrics, which are something that we do internally at Augusta, he said that we did $107,000 last month. And so that would mean that we would be in the 500 to $600,000 range, potentially beyond, with Christmas lights this year around. So that's kind of the different in terms of top line for this year.
Mhm. So it sounds like there's more opportunities for you now to be able to give your employees work in the winter. So it's going to be definitely manageable as you start this 500 to a million mark. The role of the owner is typically the estimator, which you're
Hmm.
now out of the field and mostly doing the estimates. And it looks like you're not able to get all the projects done throughout the day. So, can you tell us where you are and what
Hmm.
kind of services you offer?
Yeah. So we also, during this time, it can also be some of the hardest,
Mm-hmm.
because this spring we also had a whole bunch of employees quit all at the same time.
Oh,
And I
man.
remember we did like 146 budgeted hours with me and two people. And
Amazing.
so when stuff hits the fan at this stage, it really can. But
Mm-hmm.
me and my wife had talked, like, it doesn't matter, like nothing else matters. Like, we just have to make sure that we have 3 to 4 months to make sure that the rest of our year is good, because we don't want bad winters anymore, or lesser winters than, you work hard for 9 months and you're like, oh well, we have to conserve during the winter. Like, that's a gut wrenching thing to tell your wife. But throughout that, my role has changed. I was doing 60 hours budgeted hours a week in the spring. Then about June came around, we did a price increase that helped out. We found some new employees. We raised our base wage. We were able to get a little bit more traction on the employment front. And so that kind of helped us out. And so I still do some budgeted hours here or there. I think last week I only did like a handful, but the week before that I did like 35. So it really just depends. But we also had a really big project. So again, project manager, estimator, kind of going into that role. And now it's like the guys told me last week, they're like, hey, you had a hard year. You should go on vacation.
Wow.
Like you should
possible.
go do something. Yeah, it's possible whenever your team understands that you will work just as hard as them, if not willing to work harder or beside them.
So most of them have only known Augusta except your first friend and maybe your uncle and maybe some of the first people. So they haven't known anything different. So are you implementing by this point P for P with your team? And do you have a little bit of help from Command Center? Was that a thing?
Yeah.
What's it been like for you as you just approached the 500,000?
Yeah, so I did P for P out the gate. I think I joined in January, and I told them, hey, guys, whenever the season starts, whether that was March 1st or April 1st, we're switching over immediately over to P for P, because I kept 2 guys in the winter during the transition because I wanted to be successful the first year.
Yes.
So I kept a couple guys, and there was a lot of stuff going on with the brand transition. And I mean, it was a lot of admin stuff, but they helped out with it. And I gave them 10, 20 hours or 30 hours during the winter, or we had snow or whatever else in between. And so they helped out. And I had Command Center from day one. Whenever I joined, I thought that was the best thing ever. I went to training with my wife, and I was like, oh, no, I can do some of this. And she was like, no, you're not. And you didn't do it very well anyway, and you stress about it to begin with right now. So why are you telling them that you're going to take care of this whenever you're not even getting it done? And I was like, okay, whatever you say. Like that's probably very, very true, which my wife went to training with me, which was helpful. So she got to see some of the stress or some of the commitments or the pep talks. And she met you, Mike, Lee, and some of the other franchisees. And we used Command Center I used probably 80 or 90% of their services the first several years. The only things that I didn't have them do was like payroll or QuickBooks, which I don't know. I just liked doing that. I feel like some people take their paycheck very seriously. And if somebody's ever upset, I wanted to be able to have those answers. And it's just different. It was just my personal preference that I stressed about. And then now we use, how many departments are there at Command Center? Like 20 something? Yeah, I think we use 3 or 4 now. And some of that came to my wife needed a job.
Okay.
So
That makes sense.
Yeah, she was willing to step in. Her current work didn't pay her a whole lot, and the hours were really funky. And my comment to her was, well, you're either going to find a job that pays you more to make it worth the weird schedule, or you're going to have the hours that we want you to have. And so now she has the hours that we want her to have. And at first it was just like emails, helping out with scheduling, like super simple. We started that in April. And then it got to the point where I was like, hey, we can, but at this size, I was probably going to pay Command Center, 10 or 15% of annual revenue anyway. And so even if I paid her exactly what she was getting paid beforehand, which was $18 something an hour, so $30,000 to $35,000 a year, I was going to be spending that. If I was going to be spending about double that with Command anyway. So I was like, well, now the business can afford to have you be full-time, and it makes sense. Not to say that I would recommend that to everybody. And it does pose its own challenges for sure.
Definitely. So you're saying that in that wobbly time of just getting started, so much to focus on, that if you can throw some things over to Command, you probably should, till you get the grasp on everything else and can afford some help on your own.
Yeah, it took me 3 years of using Command to get there. So, I mean, it's not an overnight thing. And also my first year in Augusta was me learning Command. Like my second year, last year, I gave us, a speech, a 15-minute presentation at our conference about how the spring rush before was better. Was because my communication with Command was, well, they don't have the knowledge that's in my head, because you're like, well, why can't you just do this? Well, tell them that that's what you want them to do, and they'll most likely do it. And so I think communicating with them better, being more thorough in your estimates, because I think that command can also challenge you to be more professional at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And command was very much in the baby stages, big decisions,
Hmm.
and really you're growing with us with all of the frustrations involved in that. So hopefully the people coming after you in
Hmm.
that stage, from your input and changes that were made at command, were very beneficial, I think. So now at the beginning of this stage, what would you say are your concerns or your doubts?
Oh, beyond 500,
Mm-hmm.
um, everything's a little bit more expensive.
True.
I feel like at this point, like, there's times whenever you have like, you kind of keep like the old equipment and you're like, oh, this will be a good backup. And then sometimes you feel like it hinders the guys. Like, I don't feel like equipment should hinder the guys whatsoever. So like, we just bought another mower, even though I didn't pay for it in cash. I was just like, this is something that just needs to happen, because if not, then they're not producing well. And then it's going to affect P for P, and it's just a stumbling block all the way down the hill. And I also put a question in the Mike Mastermind actually for today. I was like, I kind of know what I'm supposed to do. There's the worker, there's the manager, and then there's the maker. And
Yes.
whenever you're listening to like the Moses, they talk about that quite a bit. And
Mhm.
they're a manager until like $10 or $12 million. So I mean, it's a
Right.
different position of what they're looking at. And I asked the question with Mike. I was like, I I know what I'm supposed to do, but there's so many things that I could do. I don't know. It's like you don't know where to start sometimes. And also, from going from a worker into a manager, I almost feel bad that whenever I show up to the shop, I'm clean and my guys are dirty.
Yes.
And
Yes,
so,
I
and
know
they
Mike
tell me not
always
to think that.
recommends that you're still in the uniform, that when you
Yeah.
come there, you're still in the boots, you're still in the tan pants if that's your standard.
Hmm.
And they know that at least you're on the job and you're not on a yacht somewhere in your tank top
Right.
and shorts. So they at least know that you're engaged. So that's from this stage to the million is going to be a lot of those struggles for you and transition. So I can see that there could be a lot of doubts. What is your focus regarding growth or just staying stable and right
Hmm.
where you are for this period of time?
Yeah. So I would say that at the beginning of the year, going through winter, it's always a good struggle getting out of the winter hole. And so this year, I was telling my wife, I was like, we have to be profitable this year. Like, I have to take advantage of the springtime rush, which my schedule was 5 a.m. to 12 midnight, pretty much every day for
Mm-hmm.
like 3 months. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had to double down in the field because I had multiple employees quit. And then we picked up like 100 lawn customers. And then we went from like 87 to, whenever we did the price increase in June, to like 204 in about a 2 or 3 month period. Because it's our third year with Augusta. I did 5 to 10,000 door hangers, and then it all just hit at once. We got all these
Yeah,
accepted estimates, and then everybody quit, just like every time, right?
of course.
And but I didn't care. I was just like, I can deal with the physical stress. I didn't want to deal with the emotional stress of like the employees causing drama or whatever else. And
Mm-hmm.
so I worked Saturday and Sunday to hire people or to do equipment maintenance or to do whatever else. And I had my other employees. We went to 5 days at 5 10s instead of 4 10s. And I was like, look, guys, it's my company. I don't expect you to stress about it like I'm going to. Just
Mm-hmm.
complete your normal budgeted hours. We're just going to do an extra day, and you will get paid for it. And that's just really the only thing that I can ask you to do. So here I am at 7, 8, 9 o'clock pulling into my driveway, just finishing, and they got off at 4 or 5 o'clock like a normal work day, which is totally
Yeah.
fine because it's my stressor. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just doing 10 to 16 budgeted hours a day just to make it in the middle of spring rush, so everything's double growing, just to make it happen. And so, but to answer your question, we did a price increase of 20%. It gave us the profit that we needed, and we're kind of going into growth mode again right now.
Okay.
So we had about 2 or 3 months of profit, where there was probably $50,000 or $60,000 of profit in those 3 or 4 months that we raised prices, and we only lost like 8 or 10 customers in the price increase. So that really did nothing for my workload. All it did was do the same thing, and then we picked up more clients on the higher pricing anyway. And so I think now we're going to go into growth mode because I want to capitalize on the fall leaves and then the Christmas lights going into it. So I think we really needed that profit in between, and sometimes it was okay to take 2 or 3 months off, but it wasn't really off. It was just like take your foot off the pedal, what is it?
Like to refocus or pivot.
Yeah, refocus after the springtime craziness or the springtime hell, and kind of just regroup is what I was going after. Regroup because the employees felt the brutalness. We had the worst weather that we've had in like 40 years. We've had 44 tornadoes this year. We had monumental amounts of rain. We had like 3 feet of extra rain for the year. I mean, it was insane. So I think it's just, but we had a good team. We had some good foundational people, and they're still with me. The people who stayed through the struggle are still here right now, and they're probably going to be the two people. They're going to be the two people I keep over the winter and with Christmas lights.
Got it. So you'll reduce some people, but you'll keep some others. And now there is opportunity to be able to have some winter services. So you probably feel a little better about that with your team. Relationships are a really big deal. And these times are difficult, especially that 2 to 5. And then beyond that, now you have office staff, office help, whether it's your wife or anyone else. But how has the relationship with your wife changed? How much does it matter to have had her support during this time?
Oh, I think it's great. I don't think a lot of my friends' wives would be okay with them. Like my wife just really wants me home for dinner. If I'm there to have dinner with her, she'd make me put my phone in the room, and we'd have an hour, and then I'd just go right back to it. Her big thing was like she at least wanted to have dinner together. But I will say at the beginning of this year in February or March, we did do kind of like maintenance therapy, like couples therapy. And I felt like that was really helpful because it's really just communication. You're saying the same thing with different words. And so I think that really helped. We did like 12 weeks with that. And I think it's probably super beneficial. It was going to be one of the most stressful times of the year. And so had my employees quit and we had not done that, there probably would have been bigger struggles. And with her transitioning into the office staff at that same time, like the week that she quit her job to then work for me is whenever those other employees quit. So, and then we had reduced command center support because with the anticipation of me training her or her coming on to do those, and then like, oh crap. And so we had to sit down and we had to have some hard conversations or thorough conversations or late nights or, I'd be like, well, I'm getting home at 8:00. Like we can do it then. And she'd like, the office is closed. And I was talking to Dustin Biernick and he's like, and I was telling him I was frustrated with that. He's like, why? Command center wouldn't be any different. At 8:00 your time, command center's closed. He's like, why can't you train her during, those hours? And he's like, it'd be no different than another office person that you have.
Yes.
And so other people really help put you into perspective because, especially whenever they know the long-term goal that we all want to have. But I want to have her help us get to that $1 million to $1.5 million mark over the next probably 3 years.
Fantastic. So you have a good goal and a good timeline. So I wanted to ask as we wrap up a little bit here, you're not all the way to the final stage, which a lot of people never get to. And you're multiple years in, you're at the beginning of the 500 to 1 million mark. So your focus seems to be money motivated, growth motivated. What would you say to others coming into this stage with the vision of the 1 million, 1.5, what you're thinking of?
I think kind of like what Mike mentioned sometimes, like it's okay to take a pause for a minute to then sustain, like to then correctly foundationally build going into that $1 million to $1.5 million stage. Like if we were on coaching calls, like it's just kind of one step at a time. Like you have the sales, the leadership, the work, like those are your manager, maker, and worker stages. And like right now, like as much as I was working in the field, like you need to then change the role of now you have to make sure things are like the shop is good, the maintenance is taken care of, your advertising is on point, you have a strategy plan to then continue to build. And like that's some of the stuff that I'm running into now. Like now that the guys don't need me, I need to fill my time with some of the stuff that I used to get distracted with whenever I was in the field, and now I have the time to double down on that. So just like I used to double down on the field, I need to double down on those other duties as well.
So we have a council for some franchisee owners
Mhm.
that together they vote on behalf of the owners, and we
Yep.
choose people that are in these different stages so they're able to help others and make good decisions by collaborating together from people in all those stages. And
Mhm.
so now you are on that council, and
Yep.
why did you feel like you wanted to put yourself forward to be in that position?
Yeah, so I think we just got reelected, right? So this would be I guess I'd be doing a second term on the
Hmm.
Franchise Advisory Council. Um, I don't know. I remember I used to tell Lee like anything and everything Augusta Nation. Like I just wanted to be a part of it, not necessarily like be a name of it, just be a part of it. Just I don't know. I feel like at training, you asked what our superpowers were, and I felt like I was a kind individual, and I just wanted to help people, or I wanted people to not do what I did. Like whenever I do
Hmm.
calls with people, prospective franchisee owners, they're like, "So what did you do?" I was like, "Well, I'm not going to tell you what I did. I'm going to tell you what you shouldn't do." Is more so
Hmm.
my approach to it, or like, here's the stressors that you have to go through, or you have to accept, or if you're married, or if you're not married, or like, here's some strategy that I would do to help out with that. So it was just anything and everything Augusta Nation. I just wanted to be in the know. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to build. I just wanted to be stretched as an individual as well.
Fantastic. And so beyond that, we also have coaches. And the
Hmm.
coaches, they don't get paid, and they are available for other franchisee owners to schedule calls, and we do encourage that they have one call a month. What has
Yep.
this experience been like for you, not ever being in that role, and now you're actually telling people what to do with their numbers, how to run their teams, and do you feel overwhelmed by that or feel like you're moving up in that position? What has that been like for you?
So I think that's kind of the cool thing about Augusta. There's always somebody in the next stage, and
Hmm.
if you're, as long as you're not at zero, there's always somebody below you that you can help with or coach or. I'm kind of going along. I think all of Augusta Nation has the heart of a coach, because like we give more than we take, or else they wouldn't be a part of the franchise.
Hmm.
And so I guess that's like, we don't get paid, but the whole mantra of a part of Augusta is to give more than you take, especially in Augusta Nation, at least between
Yes.
individuals. So I didn't think I was going to get accepted. I was like, man, we kind of had a weird year, and we're still in limbo. And I was just like, I don't know. I just wasn't anticipating it. And I was just super excited whenever I got onto it. But I think it really makes you get your crap together. I'll tell you that
No
much.
kidding. Yep,
You have to do
100%.
exactly what you're saying.
So sometimes
Um,
you have to actually push yourself to be better and uncomfortable,
mhm.
and you come into roles that you feel like maybe you're not really ready yet.
Yeah, because I took all my coaching calls still, even though that those employees had quit. I took emergency calls, or I talked to other. I had my coaching calls, or I had the coaching calls that were scheduled with me. I would just stay later, or I still talked to a couple prospective, like Ricardo Vargas, who's going to go in Virginia.
Hmm.
I was talking to him during that time. I couldn't talk to him until like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night though, and
Hmm.
he made it happen, and we made it happen, and now he's joined. And so I think, just again, giving more than what you take is just, I don't know. I just I like the business. I've done it for a while. I feel like I have a decent head on my shoulders, and so help out other people. But some of the larger coaches, like at the time, like Ryan and then Brian, and just I feel like I learned more in Augusta than I did my 4 years of college. So I just feel like there's a lot to share.
Yeah, that's the way I feel as well. So when you look to the 1 million plus, you're not there yet, but what do you anticipate for yourself?
Oh, as Brian Connor would say, the boat, right?
Oh, of course, the
Yeah,
things, the big
yeah. You're
things.
supposed to you're supposed to get the boat at 1 million. Is what people say. Honestly, I really don't know. Like it's surreal to hit over six figures in 1 month already. And I told Nick, I was like, I don't feel like we did that. Like I don't feel like I did $100,000 worth of work. And so like I feel like I'm gonna, just knowing me, I feel like I'm gonna kind of dismiss it when we get there, but I'm gonna anticipate getting there. And then when we get there, I'm gonna be like, oh well, yeah, we hit it type situation. But I don't know. I feel like I stress about, well, then we need more trucks. Should we replace trucks because some of us are older? What headaches do I want to deal with? Would I rather have payment, or would I rather have paid off equipment, but it costs $2,000 or $3,000 every time it goes into the shop? And so I think like there's a different mindset, kind of like whenever you go from like boyfriend girlfriend to like married. Like there's just a totally different mindset with your business. Like now it's like, okay, like I have to start focusing on other things now, and we have to take this seriously.
Yeah.
So I don't.
So going from here though, and thinking of being over 1 million, do you think that you would stop at that amount, or would you keep trying to grow that one, or would you start a second location?
So I'd probably have this be a larger location, and then potentially once it's profit, like, once it's largely profitable, like 15, 30%, and it's producing, 150,000 plus in dividends to myself as the owner, then I would probably do an executive model, probably somewhere else. I mean, the best area to do that is probably Indianapolis, which is at minimum 2.5 hours away. So, I mean, that's just a whole different animal at that time.
Hmm.
And whether we move there or not is to be determined in the next 2 to 5 years, to help facilitate that. But I think having the profit center first is good. And I kind of don't have I don't want to say it, I don't have a choice, but I feel like I have to grow this location. I shared that with you
Hmm.
because I have two other franchisees right next to me, and they
Hmm.
are in the next two territories that were on my list. And so, um, I think that that's also been a big help going to that 500K stage as
Hmm.
well. But I will grow this location in anticipation of opening up another location where either we have to move or we have to do an executive model or be hours away.
Do you think that joining Augusta has given you time? Meaning, has it gotten you further ahead than if you were bumbling around and trying to figure out everything yourself in these last several years?
Oh yeah. Like I was telling somebody else that even though I've been doing this for 12, 15 years, I feel like I'm really only at like year 3 or 4 of the 10 years of business
Hmm.
that Mike talks about. So, um, I was probably stuck at 2. Maybe last year I was at 3 and now I'm going into 4. Um, but yeah, I mean, Augusta buys you time. Like I can talk with other local business owners and I'd be like, "Yep, this is what you should do." And they're like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "It's just the same thing every single time."
Hmm.
Like looking at the KPIs or metrics, or I think it, like I said, it's definitely sharpened me, and I can now help other people with it. Where beforehand you'd rattle your brain with it in Augusta Nation. I mean, we talk about close ratio, we talk about stuff all the time. Like
Hmm.
it's just second language now.
Yes, for sure. Well, I know you're a very busy man, and I cannot thank you enough for your time today. It's going to help so many other business owners, whether they're part of Augusta or not. I believe that what you shared today is helpful. And
Yeah,
I want to say thank you on behalf of all of them. And I will let you go.
awesome, Liz. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Yes, ma'am. You too.
Yep. Bye bye.